The U.S. Forest Service, the agency was created basically to restore degraded landscapes in this country. So we've always been a conservation agency. But once again, right from the start, we were always engaged in restoration.
More than 100 years after the U.S. Forest Service was established to restore forested and rural landscapes, we find that urban landscapes are also in need of stewardship and restoration. Baltimore, like dozens of post-industrial U.S. cities, faces a suite of challenges, including lack of economic opportunity, high rates of unemployment, and thousands of vacant and abandoned homes that contribute to blight and crime. Instead of simply planting trees in the city, the U.S. Forest Service, together with partners, saw a much larger opportunity to improve environmental, economic, and social outcomes. This is one small piece of a larger story about how the U.S. Forest Service works together with partners to improve lives in urban areas.
We've had now kind of a long-standing partnership with the U.S. Forest Service, and that's really been beneficial on a few different fronts. One, there's been a funding source that's come to us to help us explore feasibility so that we could even determine whether or not this kind of a project was doable.
The Forest Service, together with Humanum's Details Deconstruction, saw opportunity where others only saw blight.
Fundamentally, when we get here, we have to clear the houses of debris, and then we try to harvest all the wood that's harvestable. These houses happen to be very much intact, and so we're getting a great harvest of lumber out of these houses. And once that's done, you really do have an empty brick shell inside all of these units with just a few joists left in for basic stabilization.
And so what's exciting about here is here in Baltimore, what's going on is not only are we investing in urban forestry, but we also have this great opportunity to deconstruct buildings instead of just demolishing those, and then reusing the material, creating jobs through the deconstruction, creating more jobs with then being able to use the material.
While the act of deconstructing a home creates 6 to 8 times more jobs than demolition and saves waste from being sent to the landfill, the benefits compound further when we consider the jobs created by the reuse of the materials.
So the Forest Service was instrumental early on in figuring out how we could create and build distribution channels to make sure that the wood would find a home at a market rate that would sustain the business model. They funded some of our R&D to reduce some of our inefficiencies and improve our processes.
But perhaps the most far-reaching implications of this partnership have to do with what happens to these neighborhoods once these abandoned homes are removed.
You take it from urban blight, abandoned buildings, and then you create these wonderful green areas. But then these become places where it's part of the neighborhood, it's part of the community, and it adds that quality of life.
The city of Baltimore has tore down the last 6 houses in this block. The address was 1515 to 1525. They tore those down so the community could have the entire art side of the block. Most of these houses were built a little more than 100 years ago, but because of denying and neglect, and unfortunately it was in the community's best interest to tear them down.
The real driving force behind doing what we do is to create jobs for people who have social barriers to employment. So when you look at West Baltimore, East Baltimore, where you have zip codes that have unemployment rates that approach 30%, those are some drastic numbers, and you know that the economy in those communities is struggling because there's nobody there with money to support the stores and the vendors and the other needs that need to be met, that would normally be purchased.
Our community has no food market, no health clinic, no senior center, no bank, no community action center. We have none of those. So what we're hoping on the even side of the block is to bring businesses here for, I guess, necessities that the community presently doesn't have.
That's what made me excited about this particular industry, is that it could create so many jobs. It was self-sustaining financially, and it had some pretty serious environmental impact positives as well. I think it has some positive impacts on the community anyway, socially and psychologically, because they see their neighborhood not just being destroyed, but being dismantled and then reused, and they know that's what's happening, and they know that their neighbors are getting employed as a result.
The U.S. Forest Service has also been engaged in thinking about the question of what comes next on these plots of land. Working together with the City of Baltimore, the Forest Service has published the Green Pattern Book, a tool to assist and empower residents, communities, administrative and non-governmental organizations in greening these vacant lands and improving quality of life in the city.
We want to bring a flower garden for our elementary school, which is 3 blocks up the street. And what we hope to have is an amphitheater for our millennial generation where they can rap and sing and talk. But we also hope to bring a farmer's market here.
One of the really good ways to summarize our partnerships actually comes from Jonathan Osaka, who works at the Environmental Protection Agency. What he says is when the EPA spends $10 in Baltimore, they get $100 of benefit associated with the investments that they make. And that's really what we want to do.
In Baltimore, as in Chicago, New York City, Philadelphia, and other cities, the Forest Service provides science-based information and tools and shares and leverages resources to create innovative and informational change that improves people's lives.
We feel like the Forest Service has understood our commitment to capture this particular part of the ability to salvage and reclaim wood that was harvested once and being harvested again, and has connected us to just really smart people that have helped us think through how to do it better, connected us to others who give us potential links to other resources, both financial and knowledge capital, to help us grow in what we're doing. We also recognize that what we're capturing is a material that doesn't even exist anymore, or is very, very difficult to come by. You're not going to see too many people harvesting 100-year-old trees anymore. It's just not happening.
So that's why we're here, and that's why we need to be here. And so just as our missions changed over time, we'll continue to evolve as society shifts. But it really comes down to the basic thing we've always been about, and that's conservation and this concept of restoration. It's really who we are, whether we're doing it in urban settings or we're doing it in rural parts of America.